Welcome. This is the Senior Safety Advice Podcast, and we are so glad that you've made it to a calmer corner of your day. Here, we focus on real solutions, practical help, and the kind of encouragement we could all use a little more of. So let's get to it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Senior Safety Advice Podcast. I'm Esther Kane. I'll be your host for today. I wanted to talk today about something that I encourage all my friends and families to do, and that is to write a memoir, to write your story down. Now, the response that I usually get from people is, oh, I have nothing to say, or my life's not that interesting or exciting or anything at all, something along that line. But the truth is, everyone has a story to tell. Everyone has lessons to learn. And on top of that, just writing down the events of your life and writing down, remembering all of these things that have happened to you and maybe pondering as to why they happened to you or why you made that decision or this decision. I think it's a great way to reflect on your life. And as we get older, that seems to be a very big part of our life. Just looking back and reflecting and learning, and then sharing that with not only your family, but friends and anyone else if you decide to publish it, for others. So I so encourage you to write a memoir, but what I'm going to give you in this podcast are some tips and tricks that I think are very important to begin the process. So how do you begin? Where do you, how do you get started? Well, fortunately, there's a lot of books on Amazon, bookstores, of course, as well, that you can find, and I'm going to give those to you near the end of this podcast. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, they'll be in the description, and in the podcast, they'll be in the show notes as well, links to these books. But there's a lot more. I'm just going to give you 3. So you want to start, and the books are really a guide to help you. But also these days you can use AI. You can use Perplexity or ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and so many others. Those are the ones that I use. And that they can give you a guideline as well and to help you through that process. But basically, you're going to be starting off with a memory, not necessarily a timeline. It's not as if your memoir has to begin at your birth. It doesn't have to go that way. You don't have to go back that far, at least at the beginning. Eventually, you're going to mention something about it, but it doesn't have to, start off that way. You want to pick a vivid memory, something that stands out, something that you remember often. Maybe, the day you met your spouse, or, when you had your first child, or your last one, maybe a childhood adventure, a vacation, something that changed your perspective on life, something that affected you somehow, some way. And that stands out in your mind as an event in your life. It could be a good event. It could be a bad event. Whatever it is, it's something that, for whatever reason, stands out, and then you want to discuss it, talk about it. You want to write small. One thing about writing, I write a lot. If you read any of the articles that I write every single day. Either it's for LinkedIn or Facebook or Pinterest or all my websites. You don't have to sit down and spend hours or days writing. You want to do it in increments. Do it, give yourself 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, whatever it is, just spend that little bit of time to write. You could handwrite it, if you're more comfortable with that. You could type it out on a computer. You could use you speak into a notepad, kind of an app on your phone, a recorder. That's the word, recorder, to talk about, basically, to talk it over instead of writing it, and then have that transcript over. I think that there's a really good app The kind of apps that you can use are Otter, Otter, and again, I'll have links to those below or in the show notes or in the description if it's on YouTube. But Otter works on both Android and Apple. On Android, of course, you can also use Google Recorder. You can use Google Keep on both Android and Apple. Nota, Notta. There's also an app called Autobiographer that is only on Apple, on iPhones. But that is a great way. It's basically a guide and a transcriber all at one. I think it's about $200 a year, something like that. But if you really want to get into it, that might be something to do. But either way, however you do it, write it, print it, type it out or speak it out on a recorder. Spend 10, 15 minutes a day doing that, 20, 30, however much time you want to devote to it, play around with that. And before you know it, you'll end up with a large book that you can publish. And don't worry about perfection. Excuse me. Don't worry about getting, having the grammar exactly right or making sure your prepositions are correct or just don't worry about that. Just get the story out. Write it like you speak. I think a lot of people get very hung up when it comes to writing to make it perfect or to make it flow correctly. First time around, believe me, you're going to be rewriting it in your draft after draft. That's just how it is with writing. I'll write something down on Monday. I'll, put it on a Word doc to look at it on Tuesday. I'll look at it and I don't like a lot of what I wrote and I'll rewrite it. So that's just the way it is for writing. So don't worry about perfection. Just write like you speak. Get the story out. And then when you go back to read it again, you can fix it. You can edit it. I mean, that's what writing is. So those are 3 things that you can do today to get you started, just to make it simple, much easier for you. And again, using books that give you prompts and ideas and guides, that can help you. Using AI to also give you prompts, ideas, and guide, that can certainly help you. Now, one of the things you can do with AI is you can use prompts. You can say things like, what was my favorite holiday as a child? Or, what advice would I give my 20-year-old something? Or what advice would I give a 20-year-old today? Anything like that. That kind of information can, those kinds of questions can help you begin to get started. And you can even ask AI, what questions would you ask someone about if they were to write a memoir about themselves? And then you can start answering those questions and you can start discussing it with AI, giving it information. Well, I grew up in London, or I was born in London, but I grew up in Brooklyn. What questions would you ask someone with that experience or with that background? Anything like that. Focus on moments of change in your life. The most powerful stories that we often have to tell are the ones that come when you either faced a challenge or you had to make a big decision, or you discovered something new about yourself or your relationships. Maybe you had this amazing friend growing up when you were a child, but something happened in high school or college that, broke you up, or, that is an event that is worth talking about and pondering about, what happened? How could I have been better? How could they have been better? What could have made the situation better? Or not happen at all? Or maybe it just had to happen. You never know. But focusing on moments of change can really help a reader to go through their challenges in their life, because you're teaching them how you survived yours. And instead of writing little things, little comments like, well, we were poor growing up. Okay, but what does that mean? I mean, does that mean you had no food on the table? Does that mean you had to wear the same clothes to school for 3 years in a row? Does that mean you had no house to live in? Describe it. Don't just make a blanket statement, we were poor. Well, how poor were you? And how did that affect you? How did you feel about that? Were you taunted about that? Were you hungry? Were you angry? Were you scared? How did your parents deal with that? How did your family deal with that? Your siblings, what impact did that have on you? And expand on that. Don't just say we were poor. And again, if you are having trouble, if you're stuck in that space where you're not quite sure how to expand on that, then use the AI programs to help you. Ask it. I wrote this statement in my memoir, but I'm not quite sure how to expand on it. Can you help me? And just saying that, it will give you a list of questions and information on how you can expand that. And don't compare your life to someone else. Don't compare your memoir to someone else's. I mean, we all have probably read a biography of a famous person. You don't have to have, your memoir doesn't have to be like that, like of anybody's. My good friend of mine is reading the memoir of Barbara Streisand at the moment, and it's this big fat book is what she's describing, and this amazing, amazing life that this woman has had, ups and downs and everything. You don't have to write something like that. You write it in your own voice. That's the point of a memoir. You write it in your own voice. It's your story. It's your voice, not someone else's. So don't compare yourself to others. We shouldn't do that in life anyway, but definitely don't do that with a memoir. And I think one of the most important things about even creating a memoir, putting down your story for others to read, is that you're leaving this legacy. But more than just a legacy, you're leaving lessons learned. So many people think that their life is just a normal life. And I love the phrase from a movie. Let me see if I can remember the name of that movie. Yeah, this great movie called About Time. And I forget when it was, 2013, I think is that movie. But it's basically it's a fantasy kind of movie, but it's beautifully, beautifully done. And it's about a father and son who can travel back in time, in their own time, and the father tells the son at one point, to go live, and I'm paraphrasing here, but to go live an ordinary, extraordinary life. And I love that phrase because I think all of our lives are extraordinary in some way or format, some fashion. And even though it's an ordinary life, even though you're just raising children, have a regular job and, live in the suburbs maybe, or, just an ordinary life, but at the same time, it's also can truly be extraordinary because of the people that you touch, because of the things that you do, the charities that you do, the love that you give out to others. Go live an ordinary, extraordinary life. And that is what I think a memoir showcases. So share it with your family, even if it's just that you self-print it and give it to your family. My father-in-law did that. He started his memoir. He didn't get to finish it, but his wife, my mom-in-law, finished it for him. My sister-in-law helped to get it printed, and we all have a copy of this really amazing life that this man lived from, growing up in an orphanage to becoming, having his own business, very, very successful business, and traveling the world and just living a wonderful, extraordinary life. So yours is as well. I am positive that it is. But you just need to sit down and write down those amazing stories. So get writing to your memoir. I think it's so important. I'm going to go ahead and put these links down below. For YouTube, it's on a description. If you're listening to a podcast, it's on the show notes. And of course, if you haven't yet subscribed to our podcast, please do so. We're so proud to be able to, give this information out to you to help you live the best possible life that you can as you grow older, as we grow older. And I look so forward to seeing you and talking to you next time. Take care. Bye.
This podcast is part of our mission to help older adults live safely and independently. If you'd like to take the next step, visit aginginplacedirectory.com, where you'll find specialists, helpful resources, and inspiration to make every home your place to thrive.